Now under Roman feet, the first absence waits. The Etruscan League, the power Rome erased. Beneath Rome's marble is Etruscan clay. Before consuls and legions, 12 cities, Tarquinia, Veii, Caere, Volsae, and their sisters, met as a league on ridges above marsh and river. They shared festivals at Phantom Voltumni, read the sky for rules, and taught power how to dress. Rome later called this prehistory. It was a syllabus the student would claim as its own. Stakes were identity and infrastructure. If Rome could paint its rise as pure invention, it owned the future. If Etruscan methods survived without Etruscan names, the teacher vanished and the toolkit stayed. Authority rituals, urban drainage, arches, road grids, either they carried Etruscan fingerprints or Rome wrote them off as destiny. Action starts in earth and water. Etruscan engineers confronted the Tiber's swampy plain with a simple premise: drain first, build second. Channels and culverts stitched valleys to ridges. The logic became the Cloaca Maxima's backbone long before marble faced it. Temples rose with deep porches and high podiums, timber and terracotta dressed like stone, columns set to shelter crowds and pageantry. They loved the curve as structure, the arch that moves weight sideways so streets could widen, bridges lengthen, and gates hold. Meanwhile, their cities were gridded by surveyors who read landscape as geometry. Cardo and Decumanus, north-south, east-west, weren't Roman inventions. They're part of an earlier habit: align, measure, repeat. Necropolis mirrored city plans. In Tarquinia's painted tombs, leopards, triclinium, you don't meet heroes, you meet neighbors, women seated as equals at banquets, musicians mid-note, games paused mid-throw. Daily life, archived in color because city halls rarely preserved minutes. This was the moment everything changed when Veii, the bully on Rome's doorstep, finally blinked. The war didn't turn on a glorious charge, it turned underground. Romans learned Etruscan water logic and weaponized it. Dig a cuniculus under embankments, choke fields, flood trenches, starve the garrison. Lamps, wet clay, wooden props, the rhythm of picks in clay, the quiet math of a siege. When Veii fell, Rome didn't just win land, it seized a template: conquer, repurpose, rename. Stakes tightened around language. Etruscan used an alphabet adapted from Greek but spoke a grammar that doesn't slot into Indo-European cousins. We can pronounce most inscriptions, we can't parse most sentences. Contracts that governed land, oaths that bound guilds, ritual books, the library Horace Pacini and Fulgurals, survived as Roman citations to specialists, not as living texts. Rome didn't burn the shelves, it made them background noise. Priests of discipline, haruspices and augurs, moved inside Roman governance, clipped to fit Roman conclusions. Action kept echoing. Lictors carrying fasces, axes bound by rods made law visible, an Etruscan icon grafted onto Roman offices. Curule chairs, triumphal regalia, the purple-bordered toga, costume as continuity, let a young republic borrow monarchy's theater while swearing off kings. The forum's dry floor exists because someone paid for ditches before statues. Each Roman arch across a river is an Etruscan decision, refined. Meanwhile, assimilation wrapped like velvet. Etruscan elites didn't vanish, they married into Roman names. Caere's citizens earned limited rights, Civitas signed suffragio after loyalty proved useful. Shrines shifted dedications without moving stones. Uni to Juno, Tinia to Jupiter, Minerva to Minerva. Continuity masked conquest. The League's strength, local autonomy, became its wartime weakness. When pressure came, answers arrived city by city, too slow. This was the moment everything changed in the storybook, not the trenches. Romans recast the Tarquin kings, probable Etruscan lineage, as decadent foils. Tarquinius Priscus, Servius Tullius, Tarquinius Superbus became moral furniture in a republic's origin tale. Law reforms credited to Servius, census, and classes likely reflect broader central Italian practices. But the edit stuck. Etruscans were the bad old days, Rome was the reset. Impact shows up where feet fall. Centuriation, the chessboard of fields, ghosts across Italy's plains, aligned by surveyors whose tools and habits predate Latin supremacy. Bridge building spreads because arch mathematics was normal, not revolutionary. Divination embeds in state process. The Senate takes the auspices because the sky had long been a venue for policy. Even urban spectacle, gladiatorial funerary games, has roots in Etruscan funerals, later scaled in Roman amphitheaters. But there was one problem the League never solved: no single, fast voice. The Phantom Voltumni gathered elites for vows and festivals, not for joint command. Rome, by contrast, evolved mechanisms for sustained campaigning, land redistribution to citizens, and colonization to lock gains. Therefore, each Etruscan city faced Rome alone sooner or later. Therefore, treaties read as truces, not frameworks. A microscene pins the loss. A surveyor at Veii runs a cord over a fresh trench face, candle smoke tracing draft toward a tunnel mouth. He chalks a mark where seepage increases, calculates how far the team can push before supports must double. He hears distant drums, not his city. Above ground, fields he measured for taxes now sit underwater. He helped redirect by inventing tools his enemy learned better. What they left isn't a headline, it's a habit. Drain before you build. Make curves carry weight. Dress authority so it feels older than the person wearing it. Write calendars that tie ritual to the city's maintenance schedule. Name women in tombs. Teach rivals your methods so thoroughly they forget you taught them. Vanishing arrived as an edit, not an eclipse. Cities taken, elites absorbed, sanctuaries rededicated, language orphaned. Rome outlawed kings, then kept their wardrobe. It paved the peninsula with logic learned in terracotta, then told posterity the marble was self-taught. Walk any Roman archway and you're stepping through an Etruscan decision. The student burned the syllabus after memorizing it and graded itself with the teacher's stamp. The kingdom of Himyar, Arabia's forgotten maritime power. While Rome learned to drain swamps, a desert court learned to bottle a sky. In the highlands of Yemen at Marib, Himyar turned a seasonal river into a promise. A dam, stone-faced, earthen-bodied, keyed by sluices, caught flash floods from the wadi and rationed them into terraces that climbed the hills like steps. The dam wasn't scenery, it was the throne. Stakes were layered, water, trade, and diplomacy across a narrow that made empires blink. Control the Marib system and you fed a kingdom. Control Bab al-Mandab, the gate of tears where the Red Sea pinches, and you tax the world. Incense caravans still crawled north, frankincense and myrrh scented in sacks, but the real hinge was wet. Ports like Kana, near modern Bir Ali and Aden breathed monsoon winds, catching ships from India and East Africa, then exhaling them toward Aksum and Egypt. Action shows up in inscriptions cut in South Arabian Musnad. Kings of Saba and Dhu, then Himyar, bragging in hard letters about canals dredged, sluices repaired, raids repelled, treaties sealed. The titles stacked because alliances shifted. Sabaean prestige, Himyarite muscle, Kataban and Hadramaut in the orbit until they weren't. In the hills, terraced farms stitched rain into calendars. In the ports, scribes kept accounts in multiple tongues. Greek for contracts with Mediterranean skippers, South Arabian for pride, Ge'ez, and later Arabic at thresholds. Meanwhile, religion moved from backdrop to policy. By the early 6th century, the court publicly favored Judaism. Historians argue the mix, merchant networks, assertion of independence from Christian Aksum and Byzantine diplomacy, internal cohesion, but the effect was practical. When two missionary superpowers pressed from north and west, Himyar put on a creed that said, "We're not yours," neutrality as armor. This was the moment everything changed at Najran. Sources disagree on the numbers and sequence, they agree it bled. A Himyarite king remembered as Yusuf Asar Yathar, Dhu Nuwas targeted the Christian community in the Oasis city. Letters and chronicles from across the sea carried the shock. Aksum, powerful across the strait, sent ships. The Red Sea became a courtroom. Legal arguments turned to oars. Stakes spiked because Himyar sold safety at a strait. If churches burned, embassies sailed. Aksumite forces landed, local alliances flexed, Persian interest flickered from the east as the Sasanian court weighed the value of a toe in Arabia. The war was maritime and inland at once. Ports sacked, garrisons switched flags, inland capitals like Zafar caught in crosswinds. Insurance, call it that even then, went up for every cargo. Pilots whispered about hugging coasts that paid fewer tolls and promised more escorts. Meanwhile, the dam aged. Think maintenance as a monthly bill. Silt rose against stone cheeks. Spillway teeth lost bite. In wet years, the lake pressed high lines into the intake pillars. In lean years, the surface dropped to a mark a foreman could reach without standing tall. Each skipped dredge meant weaker flow to a canal, lost nights of irrigation, cranky harvests. Grain prices don't argue metaphysics. They move when water lies. Action at the ports felt like improvisation. Kana hosted Tamil and Gujarati merchants waiting the monsoon. Aden's warehouses stacked aromatics and glass, then, as hulls improved, bulked in textiles and metals. Toll clerks weighed, sealed, stamped. A fair seal bought speed. A crooked clerk sold delays. Himyar's job was to keep the average honest. Pirates tested that job every slack tide. But there was one problem. The middle was learning new tricks without the middleman. Direct sea routes between India and the Red Sea grew fatter as navigation and hulls improved. Caravans up Arabia's spine mattered less for spices that could ride wind. Inland capitals lost leverage when maritime hubs cut better deals. When a monarch's ledger leans on tolls and tithes from choke points, a rerouted convoy is a political crisis. This was the moment everything changed again when Aksum installed client rulers. Himyar didn't vanish overnight. It staggered under viceroys and countercoups. Later, Sasanian-backed forces crossed the Gulf and displaced Aksumite control. The chessboard reset so often that titles outlived the tax base. By the early 7th century, the vacuum left space for a new coalition out of the Hijaz to promise something merchants crave: predictable passage, fair weights, secure letters. Cause and effect aren't simple, but timing matters. A gatekeeper stumbled. A different book of law offered a cleaner corridor. Impact lingers in stone and habit. The Marib Dam's remains, core embankment, keyed spillways, wing walls still teach. Decouple peak flow from daily use. Clear silt before silt winds, red water lines like ledgers. Terracing techniques traveled across southern Arabia and into later irrigation customs. Musnet inscriptions freeze administrative voice. The way a king named projects, punished theft, thanked rain. Ports far afield carry whispers in loanwords and merchant shrines. Hydrology meets cosmopolitanism in one tight valley. Microscene fixes the texture, dawn at the west sluice. An engineer scratches a line below last year's mark, mutters about weed rakes and crews promised, then hears a harbor runner's breathless report, ships with Aksumite prows at anchor. He doesn't argue theology. He counts baskets, men, and hours before heat blanks thought. He decides to clear the north feeder because it saves 2 villages, not 3. By dusk, the wind lays a skin on the lake. He presses the stylus into stone a little deeper. Tomorrow needs to remember this height. Vanishing looked like edits, not ash. Names changed, seals changed, routes moved. Zafar faded inland while coastal nodes grinned at new traffic. Later chronicles folded Himyar into someone else's preface. But stand on a headland where the Red Sea narrows, feel the crosswind grab your shirt, and you're at Himyar's old office door. The lesson is blunt. Choke points mint power until maintenance lapses, diplomacy backfires, or captains learn another lane. Then the toll booth keeps its shape and loses its line. The Khazar Khaganate, the empire between worlds. While Himyar priced a strait, a power on the steppe priced rivers. Picture spring ice cracking on the Volga and Don, silver glinting in sacks, furs stacked like walls, and a court that sold something rare between 2 missionary empires: neutrality for rent. Stakes were blunt. To the south and west, Byzantium armored itself with gold and theology. To the south and east, the caliphate stretched law across deserts and gardens. The Khazars sat between, where water turned trade into tribute. If they kept both giants talking to them, not past them, they skimmed coin from every current. If one giant found a way around, the toll booth turned into an empty fort. Action starts with a double crown that diffused risk. A sacral Khagan sat above politics. A Bek ran armies and day-to-day deals. Assassination lost its point when killing one head didn't crash the body. Fortified towns, Balanjar, Samandar, then Adel on the lower Volga, choked routes like knots tied in a rope. Caravans arrived under pre-negotiated flags, furs, wax, and slaves downriver, silks and silver upriver, pepper and glass when the Black Sea cooperated. Meanwhile, courts needed rules merchants trusted. The Khazar move, famous because it stunned neighbors, was adopting Judaism at the elite level sometime in the 8th or 9th century. Theories vary on timing and scope. The practical effect is clearer. In a world where missionaries doubled as diplomats, a third path signaled, "We'll judge you without being you." Adel's market judges learned oath formulas across creeds, penalties that bit without starting feuds, and procedures that moved goods instead of grudges. This was the moment everything changed on their balance sheet when new competitors learned the rivers. Norse adventurers, the Rus, shouldered longships over portages, linking the Baltic to the Black Sea and the Caspian in one season. At first, they paid Khazar tolls, then they sampled the margins and grew bolder. Raids along the Caspian shores, alliances with Byzantine envoys, and private deals with towns upriver began to bleed Khazar revenue without breaking their walls. Stakes tightened because trade lanes were shifting under their feet. As Black Sea links fattened and maritime routes stitched tighter to Mediterranean ports, the premium on moving cargo along forested corridors dropped. Caliphal silver still flowed north in salmonid dirhams, but hoards, hacksilver cut for weight, tell a story of changing hands and thinner fees. When a middleman's edge is speed and safety, every new shortcut erases a line from his ledger. Action on the steppe never paused. Khazar diplomacy ran in parallel to defense. They partnered with Byzantium against steppe rivals. They fenced with Arab frontier commanders who wanted the Volga line soft. Tribute webs bound vassal tribes with gifts and hostages. The Bek moved troops like a shepherd moves a flock. harassing where sieges made no sense, conceding ground where marshes killed horses faster than arrows did. Capitals shifted with the margins. Balanjar burned, Samandar took its turn, Adil rose on river islands like a warehouse married to a court. Meanwhile, inside the market, a judge's day looked like logistics disguised as law. A Muslim buyer, a Christian carrier, a pagan guarantor, weights stamped in Greek, debts recorded in Arabic, testimonies sworn over different books. The settlement mattered more than the creed. A middleman's credibility is his moat. But there was one problem no moat could solve. When someone else can sell the same neutrality cheaper, and sometimes with ships faster than horses, the product ages overnight. Ruse, princes consolidated, played terror and treaty as needed, and wrote their own tolls into river towns. Byzantium learned when to use Khazars and when to bypass them. To the east, steppe confederations moved like storms, sending shockwaves that turned the Volga plain into a chessboard played at speed. This was the moment everything changed in the chronicles, not the soil. Adil fell to a Ruse raid in the 960s, according to later accounts. Arab geographers wrote of decline. Byzantine writers alternated praise and mockery depending on alliances. The Khazars didn't get to author their ending. Later powers needed them as cautionary characters, not as teachers of river law. Impact didn't vanish with the name. Earthworks still traced defensive lines along the Manich and the lower Volga, funnels for caravans and raiders alike. Coin hoards mapped commerce like constellations. Legal habits migrated north. Novgorod's multi-faith arbitration, layers of oath-taking, fines calibrated to keep trade moving. The fortress and fee model shows up again wherever a narrow could be priced: straits, mountain passes, border marts. A micro scene catches the hinge. Spring thaws slap Adil's docks. A Jewish judge listens while a Muslim silk buyer accuses a Christian skipper of shorting bales after ice delayed departure. Oaths are sworn with different words and the same eye contact. The verdict balances weight, wind, and custom. Both men accept because the alternative is knives on planks. The judge steps outside and clocks deeper draft prows riding low with cargo, painted with crosses and dragon heads. He understands that fair rulings won't hold a river if the river learns new lanes. Vanishing landed as dispersal, not silence. Titles outlived tax districts. Vassals found new patrons. Fort mounds softened. Stories soured. The gatekeeper lesson is plain. Choke points mint states until roots rewire. Then the rulebook you wrote keeps working under other flags, and your name fades in the margins of the very ledgers you taught others to keep. The Khmer Empire, early Angkor, when water made a superpower and ended it. While river tolls decided fates in the north, here power flowed from monsoon rain that couldn't be trusted. Early Angkor learned to trap a season and spend it like money. The landscape itself became a ledger, embankments as margins, canals as entries, reservoirs as vaults. Rice wasn't just food, it was payroll, tax, and faith. Stakes were simple to say and brutal to miss. If the rains arrived and the channels worked, 1 million people ate and a god-king looked blessed. If rain slipped their cue or came like a wall, silt clogged arteries and legitimacy curdled. Angkor's genius, turning water into order, could become its weakness with 2 bad years in the wrong order. Action starts with ambition carved in sandstone. At Haraharalia, engineers straightened streams, cut feeder channels, and raised the first Great Barre, a man-made lake aligned to the horizon. Then kings scaled the idea until it read as myth. The East Barre like an inland sea, embankments miles long, spillways notched to sip the flood. From a distance, it looked like worship. Up close, it was accounting. Meanwhile, the city spread like a map of intent. Gridded neighborhoods interlaced with rice paddies, roads that doubled as levees, causeways that bridged wetlands and wet politics. Every rain added a temple mountain, Bakung, then Phnom Bakheng, then the symmetries of Angkor Wat, state propaganda telling farmers the cosmos agreed with the tax rate. Bas-reliefs turned walls into archives, procession lines of rice, ox carts, fish nets, census hands ticking names. This was the moment everything changed when the monsoon started to swing. Whiplash years, too much, too little, too late, hit infrastructure built for steadier cycles. The West Barre's vastness couldn't hide maintenance math. Channels needed dredging before they silted, spillways needed clearing before floods tested them, and every prestige project stole labor from the ditch. Elites competed in stone while margins narrowed in mud. Action on the ground looked like improvisation under pressure. Bypass canals cut around clogged stretches, ceramic pipes threaded under causeways. Spillways were armored with laterite blocks. Moats around temples doubled as regulators, bleeding off peak flows when skies dumped a month of rain in a night. It worked until it didn't. Stakes climbed as politics and water tangled. Succession disputes and rival polities pulled manpower sideways. Patronage favored new sanctuaries with fresh inscriptions over old culverts with none. A supervisor skipped a section because a cousin needed masons for a tower face. The decision would matter the first time 2 drought years bracketed a flood. Meanwhile, downstream, the coast learned to steal attention. Maritime trade fattened along nodes tied to the South China Sea. Ports at the Mekong mouth promised quicker paybacks than inland rice. Merchants who once needed the king's roads could now ride tides to markets that didn't tithe to Temple Mountains. The middle moved quietly. Then crisis arrived as a sequence, not a day. A late monsoon filled channels with sediment-heavy torrents. Armored spillways held, but paddies drowned. The next year, rains failed early, reservoir surfaces shrank, weeds choked inlets, and pumps of human muscle came up short. Repair crews were thin, commanders argued. Another foundation stone was laid with speeches about cosmic order. Farmers hedged, more fish traps, fewer fields, fewer cartloads reaching the city. A foreman's ledger turned into a warning. He stood barefoot on a laterite lip, counted baskets, and traced a notch carved with last season's high mark. Today's line was lower. He sent a boy running to borrow crews and got 2 men and excuses. He knew the court's hymn about the king mastering the waters. He also knew tomorrow's dredge list. Vanishing wasn't a sack, it was a migration of authority. The capital budged toward riverine trade nodes that didn't demand such relentless maintenance. The hydraulic web still worked in patches. Villages kept sections alive because their dinners depended on it. But the centralized promise, the state as master of water, felt less true with every thin harvest. What they left is both map and manual. Lee Dar peeled jungle back to show a city without a neat edge, mounds, tanks, and grid lines tying households to reservoirs the way wires tie apartments to a grid today. Bas-reliefs at Bayon still show levee crews and bridge repair, maintenance immortalized in stone. The barrays demonstrate principles engineers still use. Buffer the spike, separate flood storage from daily supply, build redundancy across basins. Impact sits in our habits. Complexity isn't a monument, it's a subscription. Systems fail quietly when many small fixes get deferred across too many budgets for too many years. Angkor didn't end so much as decentralize. People shifted downriver, traditions followed, the name changed costume. A last scene holds the feeling. Evening on a canal lip, dragonflies skimming a surface pulled thin. The foreman runs his thumb along the wet mark, then presses harder so the line will be legible next season. In the distance, a bell from a new sanctuary rings over speeches. He lowers the basket anyway. Tomorrow needs water, not words. The Garamantes, masters of the Sahara's hidden rivers. From monsoon jungles to stone desert, now the miracle with no rain. In Libya's Fezzan, the Garamantes built cities where maps warned nothing. Their secret wasn't wells, it was tunnels that sipped an ancient sea underfoot. Power rode underground. Stakes were thirst and motion. Control an oasis set the price of survival. Chain oases across valleys and you tax every caravan moving between Mediterranean ports and the Sahel. Gold dust north, salt south, glass beads both ways, and captives whose stories never made it to ledgers. Rome complained about raids from the south. Desert peoples called the Garamantes a market that never closed. The risk was embedded in the miracle. Their water was inheritance, not income. Action looked like engineering in the dark. They dug fagaras, gentle slope tunnels that tapped fossil aquifers and drifted water toward town like a whisper. Vertical shafts punched at intervals gave air and access. By lamplight, crews scraped silt, checked grade with a string and a drop, and chased a trickle until it pooled. After miles, the flow surfaced into mother channels, then braided into fields. From above, the shaft dots run ruler straight toward hillsides. From below, the air turns cool and smells faintly of limestone and wet dust. Meanwhile, towns rose where gravel fans met that quiet water. Garama modern Jarma in the Wadi Al-Ajal was the hub, with satellite settlements spaced at a camel's daily pace. Mud brick houses with shaded courtyards held heat by day and surrendered it at night. Storerooms banked dates and barley like coin. Workshops fired glass and worked leather. Alleyways funneled dusk winds. Caravans slid in chalk white with salt, or glinted with gold grit rubbed into pouches, and left stamped with the Garamantes cut. This was the moment everything changed when Rome finally rode far enough to care. Governors in Tripolitania sent punitive columns south to discipline raiders. Legions burned fields and outer hamlets, then discovered a physics problem. Walls don't matter if your enemy can vanish into stone. Garamantes fighters slipped into Fagara mouths, surfaced a valley away, cut the Romans' water, and let the sun finish the argument. Rome inscribed victories. The Garamantes kept charging tolls. Stakes sharpened as trans-Saharan traffic thickened. Northbound, merchants brought gold and enslaved captives from the Niger Bend. Southbound, salt and Mediterranean goods. The Garamantes didn't need to conquer the desert. They needed to choreograph it. Safe stages, honest scales, cool water at sunset, predictable fees. Reliability was sovereignty. But there was one problem no spear could fix. Fossil aquifers don't refill on human schedules. Every year the intake lip shaved lower into rock. Every skipped clearing let silt climb. A Fagara fails without spectacle. A shaft collapses silently after a rain, a gallery roofs with salt crust, airflow dies, and the garden at the mouth turns to powder. Maintenance is policy. When young men can earn coin on caravans faster than blisters in tunnels, labor drifts. Meanwhile, beyond the dunes, the coast learned shortcuts. Hulls grew and found winds to carry goods that once needed oases and a dozen bribes. A cargo that paid the Garamantes 3 times a year now cleared a port once. Add insecurity, bandits testing lanes, a governor upriver underpaying escorts, and the ledger thinned. A middleman survives on margins and habit. Habit changed. Action inside the Oasis became triage. Overseers rationed hours, 2 crews for a clogged gallery, 1 for a salt-scabbed lip, none for an extension that might have fed a new plot. Old men ran fingers along damp rock, felt the cool farther back than last season, and told a nephew to adjust the slope by a finger's breadth over 40 paces. Fields were replanted smaller than in crops that forgive lateness. Dates forgave the most, wheat the least. A micro-scene holds the sound. Night, a lamp lowered into a shaft. A foreman drops to the gallery, crouches where ceiling brushes hair, and sets a string on 2 pegs. The line sags wrong. He scrapes a handful of silt, hears the faintest trickle brighten, and smiles without showing teeth. Above, a bell clinks once and stops, camels kneeling. He climbs, wipes grit, and meets a trader with sea salt crust on sandals. The man says a new buyer will pay more in a coastal town if they skip the inland chain. The foreman looks east where his shafts run and west where the wind smells of emptiness. He nods because anger won't lift water. Vanishing arrived like skipped chores. A shaft left half cleared this week. A neighbor's field a shade paler next. A family gone by moonlight promising to return after harvest that never comes. Town walls outlasted voices, the desert one without a shout. What they left is visible from orbit. Satellite images stitch dotted lines across Pheasants valleys, hundreds of Fagara systems feeding thousands of fields over centuries. On the ground, you can still step into a cool tunnel at dawn and hear pebbles click under slow water, a sound like memory. Pottery, glass offcuts, bead spills, and date pits thicken house floors. A city's pulse counts in seeds. Impact stretches into modern pipes. Libya's great man-made river tapped similar deep water with pumps instead of picks. The caution doesn't moralize, it counts. Finite reservoirs feel like wealth until they don't. Extraction without recharge turns infrastructure into archaeology. The Garamantes wrote that lesson in the dark. Their reputation got edited. Romans called them raiders, later writers made them rumor. The soil is kinder. It remembers systems, not slurs. And the rule still applies anywhere thin water meets thick ambition. Cover the channel, lose evaporation, set the slope true, space the shafts for human legs, price the crossing fairly, and never call maintenance tomorrow if you want your name to outlive your walls.